This is Beyond the Moon, a Ditch Witch podcast where we dig deep into news, job site stories, Ditch Witch culture, and all the other dirt that makes up the industry.
Hey, welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Beyond the Moon, a Ditch Witch podcast. I'm your host, John Hubbard, and I'm with a very special guest today, Mr. Kevin Nuckley. How are you, sir?
I'm well, thank you. Really excited about today.
Good. Yeah, so we're those of you watching on video, you'll see we got a little different backdrop today. That means we are at the Ditch Witch Annual Business Conference. We're in the Omni Hotel in Oklahoma City, and more specifically, the Oklahoma City Tap Room. So that's where we're at. So this ABC conference we have every year. We fly in dealers from all over the world and kind of go through some presentations on new products. We talk about business initiatives for the years coming, and just kind of get together and have a good time and make sure everybody's pulling in the same direction. So today we got Kevin Nuckley here. Today he is with Witch Equipment, and he is the sales potentate. And if I'm honest, I have no idea what the word potentate means, but I saw that and went, you know what? That's what we're going to call them. So you got to explain to me what that means.
Yeah, I guess it has some kind of, regal nomenclature to it, right? Going back, my dad was nicknamed Sales King by a former employee, Brad Finley, who is one of the funniest people I've ever met. And he's actually, now he does driver's ed around here. But when I actually won #1 overall salesman back after the 2004 year, Tim Hyde, another, employee who is really funny as well,
right,
came up to my dad and said, well, if you're a sales king, what does that make Kevin? Yeah, sales potentate?
I got you.
And so that just kind of stuck. And I mentioned to you one time before that, sometimes you want to be kind of clever on a business card or, a signature and everything like that. And so it just kind of stuck. And so for events like this,
right,
whatnot, I'll sign it sales potentate, and sometimes it creates a conversation.
Well, yeah, I was going to say, it's a good little conversation starter. Or Mr. Potentate, it's nice to have you here.
Yeah, and it's something I am proud of. Being #1, overall in the family business that we had, and the story and the year that was.
Right.
I tell people it's the most rewarding year of my life up to that point before I had got married and had kids. But it was also the hardest, and it wasn't even close to that. There's a lot that went into it, and it was also, I looked at it as kind of like an MVP award. No one wins the MVP without, having a great team behind them. And we did it all together. And I made sure that I had a lot of the guys that, were with me up front. I made sure they understood how much it meant to me and where they were now all along. And because that's just how we work at Witch Equipment.
Yeah, that's awesome. Not a one-man show, that's for sure.
No way.
But the one man that's here today is important in the sales side previously. Now he's kind of leading the ship there. And also you have a personal interest in horse racing of some sort. We talked about that a little bit. I think you called it pin hooking. Yeah. For those of us that are not in the industry, what does a pin hooker do?
So pin hooking is basically buying and selling young horses. It's like, flipping houses, to a degree. In this instance, I'm buying weanlings or yearlings, which weanlings are less than a year old. Yearlings are, a year old, less than 2. And I'm either selling them as yearlings or as 2-year-olds in training before they even actually truly hit a racetrack in a real race. A lot of people tend to pay a lot more for potential. Yeah. And for like telling people, that they own a racehorse, going and having that unbelievable feeling and experience of going to the racetrack, stepping into that paddock, watching your horse come down the track. And there are very few feelings in life of having a horse win,
right,
having your horse win, and standing in that winner's circle. And so I've been fortunate to be on both sides of it. But if you're going to make money, it's really hard to do on the racing side. And therefore, when I was introduced to pin hooking, I realized, that's the side I wanted to be primarily on.
Yeah, I understand. So how long have you been interested in the horse racing game, or how'd you get introduced to that?
My parents were really good friends with the Duncans that were, the dealer in Louisiana.
Yeah.
And Bill and my dad were best friends, and Linda and my mom got along famously. And they would take trips and business back and forth, including taking us, and along with Tad and Trent Duncan, and they'd go off to Louisiana Downs then it was called the Pelican Club, and they would bet, but they would give us a program. We'd be able to kind of pick horses, and so that was very at an early age.
Yeah.
Then there was a small Class 2 track that opened up just outside of Fort Worth, Texas. I was 16 years old, had a fake ID. I actually won the first time, like the worst thing that could ever happen.
Oh, I like this. I'm going to win all the time.
And back in 1997, Lone Star Park opened up. My dad actually was fortunate enough to go in with a share with his best friend of a suite. And so therefore we started going up there quite a bit.
Right.
And if you remember, a Cowboys wide receiver named Mike Renfro, he was one of the owners liaisons, and he would actually put syndicates together of ownership of horses.
Okay.
So that's where it all really got started. That somewhat ended, pretty unfortunate, except for where it led us. My dad actually had a chance to buy Charismatic. He loves to tell this story.
Yeah.
He chose a horse called Scoot the Goose instead, who ended up just being just a very middling claimer. And Charismatic goes on to win the 1999 Kentucky Derby, 1988.
And he had a chance to buy that one?
Yeah.
Oh, that probably haunts me.
I mean, that's how it goes.
Yeah.
Right? But so we had this, this collection of horses, maybe 3 or 4. They're out in West Virginia. We got hooked up with a really bad trainer. He tried to sell those horses without owning them.
Well, that's a problem. Seems like a problem.
So we gathered them up, brought them back to Texas. And one of the guys that was a salesman for us, he knew a guy named Mike Netherland down the road from him. And we got hooked up with Mike. We raced some with him. We bought some off of him. But Mike was in the pinhooking game. And to a degree, as they say, the rest is history.
Yeah.
But there is a real significant story that always, that fills my heart, is that Mike actually died of COVID. But the last horse I bought with him actually was a really promising 2-year-old. So much so that that now one of my mentors and partners bought him for $250,000.
Oh, wow.
And I stayed on with him for 10%. I took my chips off the table.
Yeah.
His daughter had the other 75%, and she just, took and went.
Yeah.
And we campaigned that horse for the Kentucky Derby. And he won twice. His first 2 outs were right up the street here at Remington Park.
Yeah.
And I thought we were going to put him in the Springboard Mile, which is a Kentucky Derby prep race. We ended up taking him to Oaklawn on New Year's Day. And I was there for that, and that was a miserable trip. We put him in. It was rainy. It was messy. It was a terrible trip. We put him in the next race, the next prep race there at Oaklawn. That went almost just as bad, and that's where my Kentucky Derby, ended, right there. But it did lead me to Mark Martinez, who's been a tremendous influence on me in the horse racing business and a great friend.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. It's interesting. It's a world that I know nothing about. I mean, my horse racing knowledge or expertise goes back to a Seinfeld episode with Kramer gambling, and he's talking about his mother was in butter. So, but that's as far as I can go with the horse racing talk. So it's interesting to hear that. So, do you go to races now, like big races? Been to the Kentucky Derby? You go to any of the Triple Crown type stuff?
Been to the Preakness twice. Been to the Derby 3 times. Have not been to the third leg of Triple Crown. I've been to Belmont before. We had the Breeders' Cup at Lone Star 1 year. And that was pretty cool too. And I've been to a handful of stakes races, and really, outside Churchill is absolutely beautiful. Keeneland is a whole other temple, and that's where the biggest horse racing sale or racehorse sale is. Del Mar is beautiful. Santa Anita. That was actually where I took my kids' first experience. The racetrack actually was Santa Anita.
Yeah.
But Keeneland may be one of my favorites. Saratoga is a really special place too, in the upstate New York.
Yeah, they're all over the place. That's awesome. Okay, so got the pin hook and stuff in your spare time. You do some ditch witch stuff.
Yeah, you got to have a real passion for this business, otherwise it'll eat you alive.
Yep. So those of you watching or listening, most of the dealerships around the country are Ditch Witch of Oklahoma or Ditch Witch of the Carolinas. Kevin's business and operation is called Witch Equipment, which is a unique name. It's a little bit different in our structure. So where did that name come from? How did your family get started into it? Just kind of from the beginning of your crew.
Sure.
How did it all start?
Yeah, so I actually started just down the road from here. My grandfather was in Stillwater when Ed was looking for dealers. I think my grandfather was a banker at that time, and actually met Ed, and he was one of the original 3 dealers. And in fact, he ran. Even though he had basically the top half of Texas that ranged all the way out to West Texas and Lubbock and Tyler to the east and all the way to the Red River, he started out in Stillwater, and he would drive down here and sell, and he'd pick up broken machines, bring down parts, did all that. And then I think, when my mom was like, 13, 14 years old, somewhere around 1960 or whatever, came down to Arlington, or 61 in Arlington, and started our business there. And His son, Larry, my uncle, and then my father became partners in the business for the second generation. And Larry's son-in-law, my cousin's husband, Boy Kelly, is my partner. And so we represent the third generation. Right. And in that sense, I'm really proud of that. Because at best it's a 1 in 10 prospect for a third generation business to succeed. And I'm really proud of, how we've grown this business, the legacy and that we have built. But going back to the name, yeah, you're right. That was very unique. I'm not sure Ed had the, had the rules or whatever, how it is named, because I think Medlin was the other, one of the original dealers, and he was Ditch Witch Sales.
Okay. Yeah. So that's a little different.
Yeah. And so, no matter what, every time around Halloween, we're going to get some calls, I'm sure I can tell you that, but yeah, it makes it stand out. And I like that.
That's great. And you said your family is one of the original 3 dealers. So I'm trying to think back. That was what, 1959, 1960 maybe?
Yeah. We came on around 1960.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when did you officially start at Ditch Witch, and what was your first role?
Yeah. I started really at the bottom. I mean, I've worked summers, and whatnot. And I guess I wasn't officially on the roll. I mean, I was on our payroll, but not my official start date with Ditch Witch. But I'd work in the summers. I started out on the steam dock and helping out technicians and, somewhat working on equipment and doing that. But I also had time in our parts room. When HDD was really getting going, I was part of that crew that would train, demo, install these big units, and all the whole setup came with it. And then I became kind of like a sales assistant in the summers when I decided this is what I definitely wanted to do, because Sean, there is no way I was going to do this for a long time. I was too proud. I probably had too much of an ego to do what my dad did.
Yeah.
And I also thought that,
or to pave your own way type.
Yeah, it was a big part of it. It's also, I saw how hard this business is. I saw the toll it took on my dad and the stress it put on. And it's tough. It's not just hard work. It's just about hard everything.
Yeah.
But you meet some incredible characters and people through it. There is a great reward. You get to compete every day, and that's a huge deal for me.
Yeah.
But I thought if I was good enough at it, which I thought I would be, that I would have a chance at leadership. That was first and foremost, and that hopefully that might lead to ownership. And that was a long-term goal, but that's something that was important.
Always out there. You're thinking about it at least. Yeah,
absolutely. And so when I was able to put, kind of my ego and my pride to the side and really convince myself that I was going to be able to forge my own path, differentiate myself. Yeah. Father, who, by the way, if you know Paul Knuckley, he can be a larger than life personality. And so that was also something that was, I knew I had to do, even though me and my dad were really close, that, that we're going to have to make sure we had a good working relationship. It also separated itself from our personal lives.
Yeah, I understand. So you kind of worked at least had your hands in all kinds of different departments, if you will, or areas within the dealership. Was there one area that you worked in that you thought, I really like this, or that, this isn't for me? Or were you taking those roles just to learn all the sides of the business?
I took all those roles because I had to earn it and learn it.
Right.
And I built a lot of great relationships and mutual respect, understanding everybody's roles in the business, but also starting from the bottom. It's also part of our current training is that, even if I have a new sales guy, he spends time in the parts department, he spends time in the service department.
Right.
And just because of the regiment, how it built me. But sales was definitely the best, strictly because that's where I could compete and win. Sometimes, obviously there's some losses that come with that. But how I grew. That's really where I felt like I was waking up to competing every day. Okay. And I was fortunate enough to succeed and lead in that room. And it also allows me to be in a lot of people's shoes. Especially the people that I lead today. Right.
We talked about your third generation, and now you have your own kids and your own family. Do they have any interest in it?
We're a boy and a girl twin. They're 11. I think my son, appreciates what Ditch Witch is. I'm not, but again, I just turned 50. I don't know if I'm going to be here long enough to make that transition. Not sure if I want to.
Yeah.
At 11, my son's, latest aspiration is to be a geologist.
Oh, yeah.
All for it.
Yeah. I thought you were going to say a professional golfer.
Well, that's the backup plan. He told me if I don't become a professional athlete, then, I
go to geology. Yeah. So that's interesting. We were on the phone, I don't know when that was, a little while back, and just kind of talking, and you mentioned that your son's name is Nicholas, and there's an interesting story that goes with that.
Yeah, correct. So I fell in love with golf, and became a lot playing more serious when I was 12, 13 years old. Actually, I made the golf team in high school, but
Right.
nothing, more than that.
Yeah.
But Nicholas essentially taught me how to play golf in one of his videos called Golf My Way. And I've just always loved him, revered him,
Yeah.
and everything like that. And so I had it in my mind that if I ever got married and had kids and I had a son, that it was non-negotiable that his name would be Nicholas, right, or Jack Nicholas. When we had twins, I only got to have the one Vigo, right? And so I didn't have much influence on my daughter, but I at least got my son, and we didn't know we if we were having a boy or a girl. We just knew we were having twins.
I gotcha.
And I was,
See, come on, Nicholas.
yeah, I was openly rooting for a son. I had a terrible feeling I was going to have two girls and that I was going to die an early death because they were probably going to be both as crazy as Elizabeth.
That tends to happen.
Yeah, and so so luckily it's a one-on-one matchup
Yeah.
at this point.
So it turns out, though, your daughter's name is also A-OK.
Correct, Austin Olivia Knuckles.
Yeah, so literally A-OK.
Yeah, and she goes by that, and a lot of people like it, and she does too.
So we talked about your family a little bit. We've talked about the generational aspect of witch equipment and ditch witch. And it seems like a lot of those things are built around relationships and culture. So when you hear words like that, loyalty and relationships and culture and those types of things, what does that mean to you as a person?
Yeah, in fact, it's actually a question we ask a lot of potential candidates for employment too, right? In fact, it's actually on a mural that we have that we believe in honesty, integrity, and loyalty. You have our word on that.
Yep.
And I believe loyalty is something that you got to give to get. It's become a little more diluted or harder to find these days, but we built our business on it. And not just that doesn't go for Witch Equipment Company, that goes, I think, for Ditch Witch too. And when I mentioned, and we kind of built our culture, we had a really strong one under my father and my uncle, but when Coy and I took over, we had to, kind of build our own culture as well. And that was actually through hiring some people, leading differently, managing differently, giving them actually maybe a little more room, to operate and do their jobs and their roles in their company. But the relationship part is really important to me. And, you mentioned the word reciprocal. That means a lot to me. And I think it's the second most powerful word in our language behind love. And because reciprocal is wrapped up in the word love, it's also a very meaningful, word in the fact that any relationship that you have, whether it be your faith, your strongest personal relationships, and your strongest professional relationships, have the word reciprocal in them. And I think if you really take a step back and think about that, then you realize that, yes, that's kind of how you can define some of your best relationships and the ones that are probably worth investing in, and I think when we look at that as we invest in our company, our own personal lives, and things like that. It's also a chest for when you find yourself maybe failing in a relationship.
Well, that's a good motto to have in personal and professional life. He's just going to stick with that and see what happens. Good things will happen when you're doing good stuff, right?
Right.
We're going to wrap up. I think we're getting close to running out of time as they're getting things set up here in the tap house for the majority of the crew to show up. But I did have one little fun follow-up question for you. I think I know what one of them is going to be. But if you have a dream foursome on a golf course, who's in your group?
It would definitely be Jack. We said Jack Nicholas. I think Tiger, because I really put them together.
Oh, for sure.
And then it would have to be a toss-up between John Daly or Payne Stewart.
Oh.
And I guess it kind of depends on which kind of foursome you want.
Yeah, those are going to go different directions.
Or what kind of, if you're having a serious round, it's got to be Payne.
Yeah.
If you want to have something wild and crazy and fun, then I think John Daly would be a hell of an ad.
Yeah, I went to the senior PGA in Tulsa within the last couple of years, and Daly was there, and he showed up 12 minutes before his tee time and hit 6 balls, and then pulled up. He was in a cart because he had some exemption, but pulled up right next to the tee box and put his cigarette out and just ripped a driver.
Oh, he's something to watch.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, good deal, Kevin. Thank you so much for hopping on today.
A pleasure and an honor, Sean. Thank you.
Absolutely. So with that, everybody, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Well, that's it for this week's episode of Beyond the Moon. Be sure to subscribe to this podcast on your favorite platform and follow us on social media @DitchWitch.